At 8:17 p.m., my father removed me from the family group chat. I was sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment in Cedar Rapids with a lukewarm cup of tea beside my laptop and a vendor compliance checklist open in front of me. The checklist was for my actual job, not for my family, which made it one of the few documents on my screen that week that did not involve cleaning up someone else's mess for free. The last message I saw was from my father. "Since you want to make everything difficult, we're done involving you. Your brother has this handled. Stop interfering." My mother replied 1 minute later, "Please don't embarrass us this weekend." Then my sister-in-law added a thumbs-up emoji, like this was a decision everyone had voted on. A few seconds after that, the chat disappeared. I looked at the empty screen for a moment. I was not shocked. Not really. Some part of me had been waiting for them to say it plainly. So I said one word out loud. Understood. Then I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Written Withdrawal, Family Records. At 8:24 p.m., I downloaded every file where my name appeared. At 8:39 p.m., I saved every email where my father, mother, brother, or sister-in-law had asked me to review something privately. At 9:06 p.m., I drafted my first formal notice. At 9:42 p.m., I revoked their access to the shared document tracker I had built for them 3 years earlier. I did not call anyone, I did not argue, I did not threaten. I simply stopped being the quiet person holding up a version of the family that only worked because I kept fixing what they refused to admit was broken. By the next morning, everything they had been hiding behind was visible. My name is Mara Ellison. I'm 36 years old, and I work as a licensing and compliance coordinator for a home health equipment company in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. That sounds boring until something goes wrong. My job is to make sure a business can prove what it claims. Licenses, insurance certificates, vendor approvals, billing records, inspection reports, corrective action files. If a regulator, lender, auditor, or insurance company asks a question, my work is what keeps the answer from becoming a crisis. I was good at that kind of work. My family liked that when they needed me. They did not like it when I asked questions. Tell me where you are watching from, and if you have ever been treated like your only value was what you could fix, comment the word useful. Also, subscribe if you like calm stories where the truth comes with timestamps. My father, Russell Ellison, owned a small chain of assisted living homes, 3 buildings when I was a teenager, 5 by the time I turned 30. He loved being known as a respected local businessman. He liked charity breakfasts, Chamber of Commerce photos, and introducing himself as someone who took care of families. My older brother, Nolan, was his favorite proof of success. Nolan was charming in the easy way that made people forgive him before they knew what he had done. He wore good jackets, remembered donors' names, and spoke at community events with both hands resting on the podium like he had been born there. I was different. I noticed missing signatures, expired certificates, late filings, unclear clauses, numbers that did not match. When I was 17, my father took Nolan and me to the opening of his second assisted living home. Nolan stood beside him for photographs. I sat in the office sorting resident intake packets because the admissions director was overwhelmed. That night, my father told Nolan he had presents. Then he looked at me and said, "Mara has always been good with details." He meant it kindly. Still, it taught me where I belonged, not beside him in the photo, behind the desk, making sure the photo did not fall apart later. By my late 20s, my family had learned to call me whenever something needed to be fixed quietly. At first, the requests were small. "Mara, can you look over this lease?" "Mara, does this insurance wording seem right?" "Mara, can you check whether this staff certification expired?" I helped because they were family, and because their business involved elderly people who deserved better than sloppy records. Then the favors became heavier. On March 14th, 3 years before everything broke open, my father called me at 6:52 a.m. He said, "Quick question. If a medication storage inspection was missed, how bad is that?" I was standing in my bathroom with my toothbrush in my hand. I asked, "Missed by how long?" He paused. 4 months. I put the toothbrush down. That was not a quick question. I asked him to send me the inspection file, the medication policy, and the last corrective action report. He sent blurry phone pictures and a spreadsheet Nolan had made with blank columns and color coding that meant nothing. By midnight, I had rebuilt the entire tracking sheet. I flagged 3 missing inspections, 2 expired staff trainings, and 1 vendor agreement that had never been countersigned. I emailed the summary to my father at 12:18 a.m. He replied the next morning, "Thanks. Don't mention this to Nolan. He has enough pressure." That became the pattern. Nolan created the pressure, I absorbed it. In public, my father called him the future of the business. My mother called him gifted. At Sunday dinners, relatives asked Nolan about expansion plans and asked me if I was still doing paperwork. Paperwork. That was their word for anything they did not understand until it became expensive. But privately, they called me first. When a payroll classification issue came up, I fixed the memo. When an insurance renewal almost lapsed, I found the missing certificate. When Nolan signed a service contract without reading the termination clause, I wrote the language that saved them from a $22,000 penalty. At Thanksgiving, my father raised a glass and praised Nolan for leadership. I sat near the end of the table and listened. No one mentioned that I had spent the previous weekend cleaning up the licensing file that made Nolan's new building possible. I told myself it did not matter. I was not doing it for applause. But there is a difference between not needing applause and being erased. I did not understand that difference until later. For years, I thought being useful would eventually become being valued. It never did. It only made them more comfortable asking. The thing my family never understood was that my work was not about making files look neat. It was about proof. At my company, I handled licensing support for medical equipment deliveries into private homes, rehabilitation centers, and long-term care facilities. If a patient needed a hospital bed, oxygen supplies, mobility equipment, or wound care materials, every part of that process had to be documented. The supplier had to be approved. The staff had to be trained. The delivery record had to match the prescription. The billing file had to support what was charged. When everything was correct, nobody noticed. When one record was wrong, people started asking questions. My family treated that kind of caution like a personality flaw. Nolan called it Mara's paperwork panic. My father called it getting stuck in the weeds. My mother said I had a habit of making simple things feel heavy. But when something went wrong at Ellison Care Homes, I was the first person they called. In April of the year, everything changed. My father and Nolan were trying to secure financing for their largest project yet. They wanted to buy an old private school building on the west side of Des Moines and convert it into a high-end memory care residence. They were calling it Ellison House West. My father said it would be his legacy. Nolan said it would make them regional. My mother said it would finally show people what our family was capable of. Nobody asked whether the existing homes were stable enough to carry another one. They just sent me documents. The first email came from Nolan on April 6th at 10:38 p.m. Subject line, "Quick eyes only." There were 14 attachments. I opened them after finishing my actual work for the day. I remember the time because I wrote it down later. 10:51 p.m. Loan summary, draft purchase agreement, state licensing checklist, insurance schedule, contractor proposal, projected occupancy model, a folder labeled compliance backup. That last folder made me pause. Inside were documents I recognized because I had created earlier versions of them. My tracking format, my checklist language, my note structure, even a paragraph from a memo I had written 2 years earlier about corrective action procedures. The problem was that they were using my old language to make their current system look stronger than it was. One document was titled Operational Readiness Statement. On page 3, under Supporting Documentation, it said, "Prepared using compliance framework developed by Mara Ellison, licensing and documentation specialist." I read it once, then again. I had not prepared that statement. I had not reviewed the expansion file. I had not agreed to let them use my name or job title. At 7:14 the next morning, I called Nolan. He answered with a tired laugh. "Before you start, it's not a big deal." I said, "My name is in the bank packet." He said, "Your framework is in the packet." That is not the same thing. It's just credibility, Mara. You're always saying records matter. I sat still at my desk. Records did matter. That was exactly why this was a problem. I told him if a lender saw my name and title, they could reasonably believe I had reviewed the materials. Nolan said I was being technical. I said technical was another word for accurate when money and licensing were involved. He got quiet. Then he said, "Dad knew you'd do this." That silence told me more than his answer. They had already discussed me, not as someone whose consent mattered, as a complication. At 8:22 a.m., my father called. He said, "You need to support your brother." I said, "I need my name removed from anything I did not review." He sighed. That sigh had followed me my whole life. "Your brother is trying to build something," he said. "You are acting like one sentence is going to destroy the family." "One false sentence can destroy financing," I said. He did not like that. He told me the lender only needed reassurance. He said nobody was asking me to lie. He said I was making it personal because I had always been uncomfortable with Nolan being the face of the company. I let him finish before answering. Then I said, "Send me the full file." He asked why. "Because if my name is being used, I need to know what it is supporting." He said he would have Nolan send it. Nolan sent a folder at 11:06 a.m. It was incomplete. The lender checklist had 32 requested items. Nolan sent 19. I made a gap list. Missing: current fire inspection for 2 existing homes. Missing: updated medication storage policy. Missing: certificate of insurance naming the proposed property. Missing: staff training records for dementia care certification. Missing: board approval for new debt. Missing: disclosure of unresolved complaint filed January 27th. That last item mattered most. I knew about the complaint because my father had asked me to help draft the response. A resident's daughter had reported inconsistent fall documentation at one of the homes. It did not mean the business was guilty of neglect, but it was unresolved. If a bank asked about pending issues, it had to be disclosed. I emailed the gap list at 12:43 p.m. Nolan replied at 12:51. "This is why nobody wants you involved." My mother texted at 1:04. "Your father is upset. Please stop making this harder." That was how my family worked. Nolan created the risk. My father protected Nolan. My mother asked me to protect my father from the stress of hearing the truth. By 3:20 p.m., a commercial broker named Elise Harding emailed me directly. "Miss Ellison, Nolan provided you as the documentation contact for Ellison House West. Could you confirm whether the attached readiness statement reflects your review?" I stared at that email for a full minute. There are moments when a private family problem becomes a written record. I forwarded it to my personal archive. Then I responded, "Miss Harding, I am not an employee, officer, consultant, agent, or authorized representative of Ellison Care Homes. I did not prepare, approve, certify, or review the attached readiness statement. Any use of my name or professional title in connection with this financing package was not authorized by me. Regards, Mara Ellison." I documented the time, 3:34 p.m. Nolan called at 3:41. My father called at 3:42. My mother called at 3:45. Priya, Nolan's wife, called at 3:49. I answered none of them. At 4:12, Nolan texted, You had no right to undermine me. I typed several answers and deleted them. Then I wrote one sentence. I corrected a false impression in writing. He did not reply for 11 minutes. Then he sent, "You've always wanted to see me fail." I looked at that message for a long time, not because it was true, because it was useful to him. Jealousy was the label they put on me whenever accuracy became inconvenient. That night, I spoke to my mentor, Asha, after work. I told her about the lender packet, the missing disclosures, and my name being used without permission. She listened quietly. Then she said, "Mara, they are not borrowing your help anymore. They are borrowing your credibility." I knew she was right. Still, part of me wanted to fix it. That old part of me wanted to call my father, calm him down, rewrite the packet properly, protect the employees, protect the residents, protect the family name. But another part of me had finally understood the pattern. They wanted my work without my authority. They wanted my name without my consent. They wanted my silence more than they wanted my judgment. 2 days later, my father cut me off in the group chat. And for the first time in my life, I did not try to earn my way back in. After my father removed me from the group chat, I did what I should have done years earlier. I treated my family like a file, not coldly, accurately. At 8:24 p.m., I created a folder on my personal laptop labeled Written Withdrawal, Ellison Care Homes. Inside it, I made 5 subfolders: emails, text messages, third-party contacts, unauthorized use of name, formal notices. Then I started saving everything. The first document I drafted was not emotional. It was not an accusation. It was a clean, written withdrawal. At 9:06 p.m., I sent it to my father, Nolan, my mother, Priya, and the general office email for Ellison Care Homes. Subject: formal notice of non-representation and withdrawal of informal assistance. The first paragraph said, "Effective immediately, I am no longer providing informal document review, licensing support, compliance tracking, lender packet assistance, or administrative guidance for Ellison Care Homes, Ellison House West, or any related business activity. I am not an employee, officer, consultant, agent, broker, documentation contact, or authorized representative of any Ellison entity." I read it once, then again. Then I added the sentence that mattered most. No prior informal assistance may be represented as current review, approval, certification, endorsement, or authorization by me. I stared at that sentence for a long time before sending it, not because it was harsh, because it was true. At 9:18 p.m., Nolan replied, "You're insane." At 9:20 p.m., my father replied, "This is unnecessary and embarrassing." At 9:22 p.m., my mother wrote, "Please stop sending formal emails to your own family." I did not answer. Formal emails were exactly what they had made necessary. At 9:42 p.m., I revoked their access to the shared compliance tracker I had built for them during the medication inspection issue 3 years earlier. That tracker had renewal dates, inspection histories, vendor certificates, insurance expiration dates, staff training reminders, and notes on open issues. They had never maintained it correctly. They had only relied on me to correct it when something turned red. Before revoking access, I exported a time-stamped copy. I saved the access log, showing who had opened it and when. Nolan had accessed it at 11:58 p.m. the night before the financing packet went out. I documented the time. At 10:11 p.m., I emailed Elise Harding, the broker who had contacted me earlier. "Miss Harding, this is a follow-up to my prior response. Please be advised that I have issued written notice to Ellison Care Homes confirming that I am not authorized to serve as documentation contact or reviewer for the Ellison House West financing package. Please direct all future questions to the company's official representatives. I did not include extra details. I did not try to make my family look bad. I simply made the boundary visible." At 10:34 p.m., I emailed the lender contact whose name appeared in the documents Nolan had sent. Same language, no drama, no interpretation, just written clarity. Then I placed my phone face down and washed the mug I had left in the sink. That was the strange part. After years of handling every emergency like it was a test of my worth, the first night I stopped felt almost ordinary. The apartment was quiet. The tea stain came off the mug with a little dish soap. The dishwasher made its low humming sound. Outside, someone's car alarm chirped twice and stopped. Nothing exploded. I slept for 5 hours. When I woke up at 5:48 a.m., there were 36 missed calls, 14 from Nolan, 9 from my father, 6 from my mother, 3 from Priya, 4 from numbers I did not recognize. There were also 22 text messages. Nolan's started angry. "You have no idea what you just did." Then insulting. "You've always been bitter." Then urgent. "Call me now. The broker is asking questions." My father's messages were shorter. "This is your family. Fix this. Do not make me come over there." My mother's were the ones that would have worked on me a year earlier. "Your father barely slept. I hope you are proud. Please just help them get through the closing, and then you can be upset later." That was always the offer. "Let us use you first. You can have your feelings afterward." At 6:22 a.m., I replied in writing to all of them. "I will only communicate in writing about this matter. My position is stated in the formal notice sent last night at 9:06 p.m. Nolan called again 2 minutes later. I declined it. At 7:03 a.m., Elise Harding emailed me. "Miss Ellison, thank you for clarifying. For our records, can you confirm whether your name or professional title was included in the submitted materials without your authorization?" I sat at my desk in my robe, reading that question. There it was, the clean version of the thing my family wanted to blur. I answered at 7:16 a.m. Yes, my name and professional title were included in materials connected to the Ellison House West financing package without my authorization. I did not review, approve, or certify those materials. Then I added one question. Can you please confirm whether my name was still being used after I withdrew in writing? I knew that question would matter. Because before that moment, they could say it was confusion, a misunderstanding, old language accidentally left in a file. After my written withdrawal, any continued use became something else. At 7:44 a.m., Nolan sent one message. "What exactly did you ask her?" I did not answer. At 8:10, my father wrote, "You are crossing a line." I looked at that sentence for a while. Then I saved it. Because my family's version of a line had always been simple. They could use my labor, my knowledge, my name, my evenings, my weekends, my patience, and my silence. But the moment I protected myself in writing, I was the one crossing a line. By 9:30 a.m., the lender had paused review of the financing packet pending clarification. By 10:15, the broker requested revised documentation from Ellison Care Homes without any reference to me. By 11:02, the insurance agent asked my father to confirm who was actually maintaining compliance records. That was when the panic changed. The calls stopped being angry. They became afraid. My father left one voicemail at 11:19 a.m. His voice was lower than usual. "Mara, this is getting out of hand. We need to talk as a family." I listened to it once. Then I saved it to the folder. I did not call back. Family meetings had always been where they turned facts into feelings and made my tone the problem. This time, everything was staying in writing. By noon, my phone had gone quiet in the way phones go quiet when people stop sending anger and start planning. I knew my family well enough to recognize the change. Nolan had probably called my father. My father had probably called the broker. My mother had probably called Priya. Somewhere in that circle, they were deciding whether I was still useful enough to flatter or dangerous enough to blame. At 12:37 p.m., an attorney named Graham Bell sent me an email. Subject: Ellison House West documentation issue. I had never met him, but I knew the name. My father had mentioned him before as our legal guy, which usually meant someone he called after a document had already been signed. His email was professional. Miss Ellison, I represent Ellison Care Homes regarding certain business matters. Your recent communications appear to have created confusion with financing parties. Please contact me today so we may resolve this efficiently. I read it once, then again. Then I replied at 12:49 p.m., Mr. Bell, I am available by email only. Please identify the specific confusion you believe I created. My communications stated that I am not an employee, officer, consultant, agent, documentation contact, or authorized representative of Ellison Care Homes, and that I did not review, approve, certify, or authorize use of my name in the Ellison House West financing package. Regards, Mara Ellison. He answered 20 minutes later. Miss Ellison, were you previously involved in preparing compliance materials for Ellison Care Homes? That was the question they wanted to stretch. I replied, I previously provided unpaid informal assistance to family members on limited documentation issues. That assistance did not authorize Ellison Care Homes to use my name, professional title, templates, prior language, or informal guidance as current certification or lender-facing support. I documented the time, 1:16 p.m. At 1:32, my father called. I declined it. At 1:35, he texted, You're making us look like criminals. I stared at that sentence for a moment. Then I wrote back, I am making my role accurate. He did not respond. The public confrontation happened 2 days later, on Saturday morning. My father and Nolan were hosting a private preview breakfast at the old school building they wanted to convert into Ellison House West. It was not open to the public, but it included the people whose opinions mattered to them: the broker, the lender, 2 city officials, a contractor, a few potential investors, a photographer from a local business magazine. I had not planned to attend. Then Elise Harding forwarded me a revised attendee packet at 7:06 a.m. on Saturday with a short note. Ms. Ellison, this packet was circulated last night. Your name no longer appears in the readiness statement, but page 11 references external compliance review. Can you confirm whether that refers to you? I opened the attachment. Page 11 said, External compliance review completed for preliminary licensing and documentation readiness. No name, no signature, no company. Just vague enough to suggest support without proving it. That was how my family worked when direct language became risky. They moved from false statements to fog. I replied, No, I did not complete external compliance review for this project. Then I got dressed. I did not wear anything special. Gray slacks, navy blouse, black flats. I printed 6 pages and placed them in a plain folder. My written withdrawal. My response to Elise. The original readiness statement with my name. The revised packet, my question about continued use, Elise's email. I arrived at 9:18 a.m. The building still looked like a school from the outside. Brick walls, wide front steps, faded markings where a sign had been removed. Inside, they had set up coffee, pastries, display boards, and glossy renderings of residence suites that did not exist yet. My father was near the front, shaking hands. Nolan was speaking to a small group beside a poster that said, Ellison House West, Memory Care with Dignity. My mother saw me first. Her face tightened. She walked toward me quickly and said under her breath, Mara, not here. I said, I'm only here to clarify one thing. This is not the time. I looked at her. It became the time when my work was referenced again. She glanced around to see who had heard. That small movement told me enough. Nolan came over with a smile meant for witnesses. Mara, he said, glad you could stop by. His voice was friendly. His eyes were not. I let him perform it. Then I said, at a normal volume, Can you tell me who completed the external compliance review referenced on page 11 of the packet circulated last night? The people closest to us became quiet. Nolan's smile held for a second too long. He said, "This is not really the setting for technical questions." I said, "It is a lender and investor packet. That makes it the setting." My father stepped in. "Lena." He caught himself because Lena was not my name. It was something he did when he was flustered. He mixed me up with an employee sometimes, then acted as if I was sensitive for noticing. "Mara," he corrected, "we can discuss this privately." I said, "The statement was circulated publicly to financing parties. I am asking publicly whether it refers to me." Elise Harding was standing near the coffee table. Nolan looked at her, then away. Graham Bell, the attorney, had arrived too. I recognized him from his website photo. He moved closer but did not interrupt. Nolan said, "It refers to general review." "By whom?" He did not answer. I asked again, calmly, "Who performed the external compliance review?" My father's jaw moved, but no words came out. That silence told me more than his answer would have. The lender, Mr. Arnett, stepped forward. I had only seen his name in emails. He said, "Mr. Ellison, for our purposes, we will need the reviewer identified and the scope confirmed." Nolan's face changed then, not dramatically, just enough. He understood that the room had shifted from family discomfort to business risk. I opened my folder and placed the 6 printed pages on the registration table. "I want to be clear," I said. "I did not prepare, review, approve, certify, or authorize any compliance statement for Ellison House West. I withdrew any informal assistance in writing on Thursday at 9:06 p.m. Any reference after that does not involve me." No one shouted, no one gasped. The photographer lowered his camera. The contractor looked at his shoes. Elise picked up the first page and read it silently. My mother whispered, "Why are you doing this to us?" I turned to her. "I'm not doing this to you. I'm refusing to let you keep doing it through me." She looked hurt, but not surprised. That was the part one remember most, not her hurt, her lack of surprise, because somewhere inside she knew exactly what they had been doing. The preview breakfast ended early. Not officially. People just began leaving in small groups, each with a polite excuse. Another appointment, a call to make, a schedule conflict. By 10:41 a.m., the room was almost empty. My father stood beside the display board with his hands at his sides. Nolan would not look at me. Graham Bell asked if I would be willing to attend a private meeting Monday morning to settle the family side of this. I said, "I'll attend if it is documented and limited to correcting the record." My father said, "You really need everything in writing now?" I picked up my folder. "Yes." Then I left without waiting for anyone to walk me out. The private meeting happened Monday at 9:30 a.m. in Graham Bell's conference room. I arrived 6 minutes early with a printed folder and a notebook. I had slept badly, but I was not confused anymore. That was enough. My father was already there, sitting at the far end of the table in a charcoal jacket he wore when he wanted to look reasonable. My mother sat beside him with her purse on her lap. Nolan was by the window, checking his phone. Priya sat next to him, quiet and pale. Graham Bell opened the meeting by saying, "We're here to clear up misunderstandings." I placed my folder on the table. "No," I said, "we're here to correct the record." Nobody spoke for a moment. Then I opened the folder and placed the documents in order. First, the original readiness statement showing my name and professional title. Second, the broker's email asking whether I had reviewed it. Third, my written denial. Fourth, my formal withdrawal sent Thursday at 9:06 p.m. Fifth, the revised packet circulated Friday night referencing an external compliance review. Sixth, my written statement that I had not performed that review. I did not slide the pages aggressively. I did not make anyone read them aloud. I just placed them there, one after another, like records belong. Graham put on his glasses and reviewed the first page. My father looked at Nolan. Nolan looked at the table. That silence told me more than his answer. Graham asked, "Mr. Ellison, who added Miss Ellison's name to the original statement?" Nolan said, "I did." My mother closed her eyes. Graham asked, "Did she authorize that?" Nolan rubbed his jaw. "Not directly." I said, "Not at all." He looked at me then, and for a second I saw the brother I had grown up with. Not the confident one from business breakfasts, not the future of the company, just Nolan, cornered by a sentence he could not charm his way around. He said, "We used your structure because it worked." I said, "You used my name because it reassured people." My father leaned back. "Mara, we didn't think you would make it into this." I looked at him carefully. "You made it into this when you used me without asking." He started to speak, stopped, then said the most honest thing he had said in years. "We thought you would help fix it if there was a problem." There it was. Not cruelty, expectation. They had built a business habit around the assumption that I would always arrive before consequences did. I opened my notebook. "I need to be clear," I said. "I will not provide unpaid review, lender support, licensing explanations, document correction, insurance tracking, compliance language, or crisis management for Ellison Care Homes. I will not allow my name, title, templates, or old work to be used in any current or future business materials. If anyone contacts me about the company, I will respond only to clarify that I do not represent it." My mother whispered, "So you're abandoning us?" I shook my head. "No, I'm returning responsibility to the people who claimed authority." Nolan said, "You know this could kill the deal." "I know inaccurate documents could kill it faster." Graham cleared his throat and said the lender would require a new packet prepared by an actual third-party compliance consultant with signed scope language and verified supporting records. He also said the unresolved complaint from January had to be disclosed. My father's face tightened. So he had known. Maybe not every detail, maybe not the exact risk, but he had known enough to hope nobody asked the clean question. The meeting lasted 42 minutes. At the end, Graham asked if I would sign a statement confirming I had provided some informal assistance in prior years. I said, "Only if the statement also says that informal assistance was unpaid, limited, not current, and not authorization for lender-facing use." He nodded. Nolan muttered, "You always have to make everything exact." I gathered my papers. "Yes," I said, "that has saved you more times than you admitted." Then I walked out. The collapse did not happen in one loud moment. That is not how real consequences usually work. They came in small, dated pieces. On Tuesday, the lender paused the financing review. On Friday, the broker requested an updated disclosure package. The next week, the insurance carrier asked for corrected site information before issuing any coverage letter for Ellison House West. By the end of the month, the seller of the old school building refused a second extension without a larger non-refundable deposit. My father did not have it. Nolan tried to bring in 2 private investors, but one of them asked for independent compliance review and audited financials. Nolan called that insulting. The investor called it standard. The January complaint also widened. Once they started gathering records, they found incomplete fall notes at 2 homes, expired staff training at 1, and medication storage logs that had been signed in batches instead of at the time of review. None of it meant the residents were unloved. That mattered to me. Many of the caregivers were good people doing hard work for modest pay. The problem was not them. The problem was leadership treating documentation like an inconvenience until documentation became the only thing that could protect everyone. Ellison House West did not close. The seller moved on. My father called me once after that from a number I recognized but did not answer. He left a voicemail saying, "I hope you understand what this cost." I saved it. Then I deleted it from my phone. Nolan stepped back from operations 3 months later. The official version was that he wanted to focus on strategy. The practical version was that the board, which my father had ignored for years, required an outside administrator and a real compliance consultant. Priya sent me one message in September. I was angry before. I see more now. I'm sorry for the emoji. It was not a full apology, but it was specific. I appreciated that. My mother took longer. She called me near Christmas and asked if I would come to dinner. I asked who would be there. She said everyone. I said, then no. She cried quietly, not to manipulate me this time. At least I do not think so. I told her I was willing to meet her for coffee alone. We did. She brought a tin of cookies and spoke mostly about ordinary things. Weather, her neighbor's knee surgery, a recipe she wanted to try. Near the end, she said, I thought being needed was the same as being loved. I looked at her. So did I. That was the closest we came to a shared truth. In February, I closed on a small house on the north side of Cedar Rapids. It was not impressive in the way my father measured things. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, a maple tree in the front yard. The basement needed work, and the back fence leaned slightly after storms. But every paper had my name on it because I chose it. No borrowed credibility, no family emergency attached. At closing, the title officer handed me the keys at 2:12 p.m. I remember the time because I wrote it on the first page of the notebook I started for that house. Not for evidence, for myself. I still helped someone from the old circle, but not through my family. There was a resident named Mrs. Alvarez, whose daughter had once called me in tears because she did not understand her mother's transfer paperwork. After the business changes, she reached out again. I could not act for the company, and I told her that clearly, but I helped her make a checklist of questions for the new administrator. I explained what record she had a right to request. I helped her organize her notes so she could advocate for her mother without being dismissed. That felt clean. Help with boundaries does not drain you the same way help without consent does. I do not hate my family. That would require more daily effort than I am willing to give them. I speak to my mother sometimes. I speak to my father rarely. Nolan and I have not had a real conversation since the meeting in Graham's office. Maybe that changes one day. Maybe it does not. I no longer build my life around waiting for people to value what they only know how to use. For a long time, I thought worth had to be proven through usefulness. If I could fix enough, prevent enough, catch enough mistakes, and stay calm enough, eventually they would see me clearly. But people who benefit from your silence do not always reward your loyalty. Sometimes they just build larger risks on top of it. Family is not supposed to mean unlimited access to your labor. It is not supposed to mean your name can be used without permission because your last name matches theirs. It is not supposed to mean you must keep absorbing consequences so someone else can keep looking capable. A boundary can feel cruel to people who depended on you not having one. That does not make it cruel. It makes it new. If you have been the fixer in your family, comment the word enough. Not because you are angry, because sometimes one quiet word is the beginning of getting your life back. I still keep my records carefully, but now most of them are mine. The house inspection, the mortgage statement, the receipt for the maple tree trimming, the little folder with paint colors for the kitchen, small proof of a life I am no longer using to hold up someone else's story.